Hello and welcome to this month's drawing tutorial. We're going to be working in charcoal this month, and we're going to focus on the difficulties of a girl at a 3/4 position, looking off to the side but not quite, and wearing glasses. So let's get going. The first thing that you want to do is measure the length and width of your picture. So I printed this off on computer paper to make it easy to write on and to make these marks. See how I measured in? That's because it's longer than I needed it to be. So as long as I was cropping it, I decided to make it a nice, easy to work with length, 8 inches. So this wound up between 6.5 by 8 inches. And then I needed to set up a proportional rectangle on my drawing paper. So I have done that. And then I found the increments around the sides and labeled them numerically, top and bottom, and alphabetically on the sides. Then I've done the exact same thing on my drawing paper, and now this mini grid is going to allow us to really quickly lay out the composition here. Because first of all, you can see really easily the exact point on the frame where the picture intersects. So here, here, here. Those are touching the frame. For the interior points, anything that's not touching the frame, I'm going to use a clear triangle. I'm going to set one side up against a vertical here, and then I'm going to find some other handy things to know, like where is the bottom of the chin? The lowest point of the bottom of the chin is right here above the G, just a little bit above the G. Also, while I'm at it, where's the side of the face? Side of the face is right at 6.5. I'll extend that up so that I can remember what I'm measuring. Also, let's see, this side of the face on the left. Left side of the face is almost exactly at 2. That is easy peasy. So with those in place, I can transfer them to my drawing paper. 5.5 here. The hair starts to bisect the grid right here and at about 2.5, about there. Then remember, bottom of the chin was right at top of the G. Since I have a G on both sides, I can just frame it up accurately, putting my straight edge on those two. And let's see, 5.5 was the neck. And then the face is at 6.5. I'm marking these down, but I'm being really, really light because I know that I'm going to have to erase all these pencil lines. And then this side of the head was on 2. Now with those lines in place, let's go ahead and sketch out our head. Within these guide points, I can use my charcoal pencil and I can lightly start to sketch shape of the face. I'm also using some other points, like where does the eyebrow curve down to? And I'm eyeballing that to be right at about this C. And it curves out, and I have this cheek that actually is supposed to overlap this line here. Okay. So I'm being a bit cautious, but the name of the game here is being pretty bold and fairly fast. So there's a swoop for the neck. I know that that's pretty accurate, like I said, but I'm also pretty sure I'm going to have to make some adjustments later. So I'm holding the pencil lightly and on the side, and that light hold is going to help me to always remember that my strokes need to be light and can't bite into the paper. If they start biting into the paper, then I'm not going to be able to erase them. I'm going to have an ugly, smudgy, messy drawing at the end. And then here, right before the 9, this second shoulder blade is scooping out. Alright, and like magic, we've already got our large shapes in place. So I'm going to erase the guidelines, and I can see the pencil lines that are left over. You might not be able to. And even starting at this point, I'm going to rest my hand on a clean sheet of paper so that I'm not distributing any oils from my skin onto the paper. And then while I can still see those lines, I'm just going to redraw them with a bit more care, just like this. And I'm just going to hold my kneaded eraser in the other hand and go all around the picture, erasing lines and redrawing them more accurately and a little bit more carefully. But don't devote too much time to it, because you still have a lot of guidelines to get down, and once you get those guidelines down, you might be able to make some changes to the features as well. Let me show you what I mean. So let's get down some guidelines for the eyes, nose, and mouth. Okay, her eyes aren't sitting exactly straight on the picture. This is another reason why I love using a grid, because it allows me to get the curves and the angles of the face down really accurately from the beginning. I just draw a line through and extend it out so I can see exactly where it bisects on the grid, and also that way I can look at the grid and know what it is that I'm referring to. So once I've extended those, I know that the top of eyes are D and a little bit under the C, so I'll take that to my graph here, just a jot under the D and a bit under the C. Very lightly I mark it down. Bottom of the eyes, about D1/2 and C1/4. Mark it down. Bottom of the nose, D1/4 and just a jot up from the F. Then I have the top of the mouth, a bit under the E. And you will hear me saying a bit, a little, about. So even with the grid, there's still going to be room for error, but it's going to make things a lot faster and a lot more accurate than they would otherwise be. So when you have some guidelines down for the features, then you can start to draw them in within those guidelines. So this was the eyelashes, and this is the bottom of the eye. Then you start to sketch the features, and at first they look terrible and you think, oh my gosh, I totally messed this up. But never fear, because if you've been drawing lightly, you can always change things, for one. And number two, if you've been using your grid, it actually is all going to snap together and you have nothing to worry about anyway. But then this is the step where I take the most time. I always go off camera here because I need to get my features exactly right before we move on in the drawing, and it just takes a lot of tedious work. I'm also going to sketch the glasses on because the glasses change the way the face looks a lot. So you need to sketch those on and use guidelines for them too if you need. Having those glasses in place though is going to help me to see if my features look accurate. And before I go any farther, I need to sharpen up my face and my features of the face here, all of the curves, all of the lines, until it is recognizable as the person that I'm drawing. So that usually takes me about 20 minutes to an hour. So just take your time, use that grid, and clean it up. I'll come back to you when I've gotten mine in a little bit more accurate place, but all I'm going to be doing is erasing my guidelines just the same way that I already showed you. Erasing those guidelines and redrawing the lines with more care. Okay, once those lines are cleaned up, you're ready to add your base tone. This isn't the shadows on the face, this is the color of the skin itself, because nobody has paper white skin. So we're going to put that down using a charcoal pencil on the side. I'm just going to start at the top of the face and let the weight of the pencil put down that tone for me. I'm not pressing at all. And in the hair, there are some flyaway hairs that I might want to accent. So if you look really closely, some hairs that cross and go into the face a little bit, and they're blowing in. They add a lot of realism. So I like to put those in before I add any tone in those areas by just indenting the paper. You don't have to go too nuts with this, just a few places. Make sure though that if you do this in one place, you do it in at least 2 other places. Otherwise it will look like a mistake. There, now I can keep going, adding that base tone. Excellent. Then tape the borders with some blue painter's tape. Sometimes this is green too. It's just an easy release tape that won't tear your paper. There we go. Then pick up a chamois cloth, find a clean section of that, wrap your finger around it and just start to circle stroke so that you get rid of all those lines. See how nice and smooth and light it turns? That's because of the chamois cloth. Some of my features are hard to see, so I'm going to protect the rest of my paper with a clean sheet of paper like this and go in and just bring them out again very, very gently using my sharp charcoal pencil. I don't need to bring out every line, and certainly not with equal strength because this isn't a coloring book. I just want to bring out the darkest lines. So let me finish that and then I'll come back and show you how to start shading. After blending that base tone, then you can start adding shadows to the face. And it's the same process, except you're going to blend differently and you're going to apply the shadows a little bit differently. So what you're looking for when you're trying to start with these shadow shapes is the shapes over all of the features together. So don't try to separate out shading the nose from shading the mouth from shading the eyes, because everything is getting hit by light at the same time, and so everything is going to be grouped together with a big complex shape that goes over everything. So I try to see that shape as one big piece with intricate little details in it to be for sure. But see how this shadow that goes around the chin and under the jawbone and under onto the neck dips down and becomes the shading on the throat here, and then it comes up to become the shading on the chin, which combines to join the shading under the lip, and so on and so on. Don't do anything very darkly at this stage. You're trying to work everything up gradually and at the same rate so that you can see how shading one area affects the rest of the face. If you work up a lot of detail in just the eyes, for instance, it's going to be hard to see how those finished eyes balance with the rest of the unfinished features. It's easier to see the balance if you work everything up together. And I'm going to start in this stage just beginning to get the sense of the hairstyle. So I'm using some long strokes here and I'm just shaping that a little bit more. And a little bit of darkness in the hair is going to change the apparent darkness of the skin too. So by darkening up the hair, I'm going to in effect be lightening the skin. Okay, so once you've put some of those shadow shapes down, I see one more that I missed here under the cheek. Once you're done with that though, you're going to blend those shadow shapes with a large stomp or tortillon. That's just a blending tool that's made up of rolled paper. So a stomp is compressed and the tortillon is rolled, but they both serve the same function. And you want to have several different sizes of them so that you can always use the largest blending tool for the area, and that will give you the smoothest finish possible. So I'm just going to start in one area and I'm going to use either small back and forth strokes or little circle strokes and blend those tones smooth. Work under the glasses, and I'm going to blend all of the shadows that I put down in this last step. And I'm blending them the same way that I put them down, as connected pieces of a whole. See how I'm just darkening it up little by little. I'm going to do this work over the entire face, and then we'll start going into the individual features and adding more details. After rendering those shadows on the face, you're ready to start adding detail to the features. So just get a nice sharp couple of pencils and a kneaded eraser, and then I'm going to start in the pupil, just darkening up and leaving a space for the highlight like this, darkening around the iris, that's the colored part of the eye. If you've drawn your lines carefully, then adding the detail to them is really, really simple. It's just a matter of darkening up a few spaces and then using a kneaded eraser and a tortillon to blend some things smooth, make it look really finished, and that's all there is to it. It only becomes more challenging when you don't take the time in this layout stages to really make the drawing look correct. Add some spokes, then use a small tortillon, blend the shadows that you put on the white of the eye, blend the iris, and blot that pupil so that it stays nice and dark as well. And after blending, go back and add more details with the pencil, including some eyelashes, top and bottom. Now she's unusual because she has really long lower eyelashes. They almost look like they're longer than the top. So I'm going to keep them that way. Always try to stay true to whatever you see in the portrait, because it's those little differences that make us look unique and recognizable. I'm going to pull out that highlight, keep it nice and clean, and then you can see already how much that little bit of work that we did in the eye is already helping the realism. I'm going to do the same thing to add some detail to the nose. Just start by darkening up in the nostril, and then carefully add a little bit of shading where you see it on the outer nostril here. Then do the rest of the work with your blending tools. So blend out that line so it no longer looks like a line. Smooth down inside the nostril here, darken up underneath, and then use your kneaded eraser to pull out the line on the bridge of the nose right here. Keep that nice and light. And the same sort of thing goes on in the lips. I'm going to add a base tone and just pay really close attention to where the shadows go on these lips, because they're very, very light struck on the right side. Then we just fill in with the stomp. And then once you have a base tone, then you've got something to work with as far as you can pull out lines with the kneaded eraser. You can add more detail with the pencil. So let's flatten the kneaded eraser into a blade and start to pull out some of those lines and detail in the mouth, just like this. And then if you need to, you can re-darken one side really carefully with a very sharp pencil, or you can blend that smooth with a small stomp or tortillon. So I'm just going to go back and forth, fill in the rest of this eye, and finish up in a little bit more detail work on the mouth and nose, doing those same things. So I'm going to come back, show you how to do the glasses and the eyebrows and the hair. Alright, we're this far, so I'm going to start laying in the hair and add some darks to the glasses and eyebrows. And you're going to be surprised by how much the face changes. So we've already indented the paper. So what I'm going to do is just use the side of my charcoal pencil and start adding some of these darker stripes. So you get the tone on the paper, and then you start to get the shape of the hairstyle. I like to develop both of those two steps at once. Then we have a really dark area here where the hair comes up and then swoops down and really carves out the shape of the face. So I'm going to press nice and hard, and then it sort of blends out. It's not quite so dark. Let's see, the eyebrow is going to go right into that ridge. This is the brow line. So I can add some darks of the eyebrows. And then under here, the dark is going to come right in and sculpt out the face on this side. And it's the contrasts here that really help the face to pop. So don't be afraid to go dark. And then I blend some of those darks into the rest of the hair, just like this. On this side of the face, she actually has a blonde strip of hair, and then the darkness is caused by the shadow being cast by the hair lifting up off the face. So I'm just going to add some shadow, circle out to make it a little bit softer, just like this, and then a little bit more shadow right up here. And when you've come this far, you can use your stomp and just blend those stripes to make them a little bit less stripy and more realistic as hair. I'm also going to blend this shadow on the face. You can do the same thing on this side. I can bring that shadow right down onto the shoulder here and right into this divot under the chin. There. Now, let's add some darks to these glasses. Study the glasses first, and you can see that there's a ridge of highlight right in the center. So I'm going to start by outlining the inside, and then I'm going to do the outside, and I'm going to leave that light rim. You don't just want to go ahead and fill in the glasses and make them perfectly solid. They won't look realistic. And then you can fill in once you have those lines determined using the side of your pencil. Then I'm going to fill in the tone with my smallest tortillon, just like this. And that will make it nice and solid, and it'll still have good crisp lines. I'm also going to add just a few little strands and do a little bit more work in the hair by pulling out some highlight lines and kind of cleaning up the highlights that are already there. So at the back of the hair, sometimes you have a lighter spot. This is easily done with a kneaded eraser because you can just squeeze it and clean it, and then it's ready to go again. And then you can add some specific hairs right over the top with your pencil. Sometimes I do this step with graphite pencil, and you could also do that with your kneaded eraser pressed into a blade. Just cross over the top like that. Light pressure, very thin blade. Make sure your kneaded eraser is clean, and that is going to work best when your hair tone is nice and light. So let me add a few more touches in the hair and glasses, and also this eyebrow, and come back to you and show you how it's looking. Okay, I did a little bit of work to the hair and added some tone to the glasses, and I feel like the portrait is good enough to take off the tape now. So that is your last step. Just peel that off, and there we go. Here's the first reference material we started with, and here's the finished portrait. Hopefully you've learned a few things about how to build up the portrait in steps. Using that grid system is going to be really helpful. And then even when you introduce really tricky elements like the glasses or a more difficult view of the face, you're still going to have success if you just build it up slowly in steps and make sure that the layout steps are correct before moving on to adding tone and adding more and more detail. That's how you avoid wearing down your paper with multiple passes of erasing, and that's how you get a really nice, realistic, eye-catching portrait. So I hope that you take the time to draw this in your own studio, or at least that you've learned something from the lessons that I used today in drawing it myself. And of course, I hope that you join me next month for another drawing tutorial.